Bill Gates has finally broken his silence about what truly happened with his wife Melinda Gates. In January of 2025, he had a sit-down interview with the Times of London, and he uttered 5 words that brought the internet to a grinding halt. The mistake I most regret. He wasn't referencing a disastrous investment, nor was he alluding to a software glitch that had set Microsoft back by billions. He was speaking about the loss of Melinda, admitting, "The divorce experience was agonizing for both me and Melinda for at least a couple of years." He stated, "You would absolutely have to place that at the very top of the list. For Melinda, however, it was different. Many things, but I was not happy that he had held meetings with Jeffrey Epstein." She described him as evil personified and confessed, "I had terrible nightmares about it for a long time afterward." Bill added, "There are others, but none that compare, none that truly matter." He wasn't referring to the affairs or the internal investigation by the Microsoft board. He wasn't even talking about Jeffrey Epstein. According to the wealthiest man in the interview, losing his partner of 27 years was more devastating than all those other issues combined. But here is what he refuses to discuss: the real reason she finally left, and what his own children said to him when the scandalous headlines broke. And then there is the name he's been fleeing from for 6 years, a name that has just resurfaced in 3 million pages of newly unsealed federal documents. The interviewer pressed, "You continued to meet with him over a period of several years, which means there were a number of meetings. So what exactly did you do when you discovered the truth about his background?" He replied, "Well, as you know, I have already said that I regretted ever having those dinners with him." And there is absolutely nothing new to report on that front. Is there any lesson in this for you or for anyone else observing the situation? Bill's curt response was, "Well, he is deceased now, so let's examine the complete history." Bill and Melinda first met in 1987. Their paths crossed at a Microsoft press dinner hosted in New York. At the time, she was a product manager within the company. He had already ascended to become one of the most affluent men in the entire country. Their chemistry was instantaneous, but their journey was anything but simple. Melinda would later portray Bill as a man who existed within a world of spreadsheets and code, someone who required being drawn into the emotional sphere. He was not one to enter that world of his own volition. They were in a relationship for years before Bill was finally able to fully commit. And a particular detail about the very start of this marriage provides a significant clue as to how it would ultimately conclude. Prior to proposing to Melinda, Bill placed a call to his ex-girlfriend Anne Winblad specifically to request her blessing for the union. Winblad was a prominent venture capitalist whom he had dated throughout the mid-1980s, and even after they parted ways, they maintained a special tradition. Every single spring, Bill would go on a long weekend getaway to her beach cottage, which was situated in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. They would spend their time riding dune buggies and taking walks on the beach together, a fact documented in a 1997 Time magazine feature by Walter Isaacson. This tradition carried on for more than a decade, even while he was married to Melinda. Both Bill and Anne strongly asserted that these trips were completely platonic. Melinda had, it seems, consented to this peculiar arrangement before the wedding even took place, and that one detail tells you nearly everything you need to know about where this marriage was destined to go before it had even begun. Rumors swirled that Bill had contracted a social disease from Russian women and then requested Epstein's help to obtain antibiotics he could give to Melinda without her knowledge. Melinda later stated with resolve, I left my marriage. I simply had to leave my marriage. It was what I wanted to do." A negotiation concerning another woman was already a condition of their union. They were wed in Hawaii on January 1st, 1994. For the next 27 years, Bill and Melinda meticulously crafted what seemed to be the embodiment of a perfect partnership. They raised 3 children and co-founded the largest private charitable foundation on the entire planet, which managed an endowment in excess of $50 billion. Their public image was that of 2 extraordinary minds, united to change the world for the better. But behind this polished image, fissures had been growing for years, And those deep cracks in their relationship did not begin with Jeffrey Epstein. They actually started with other women. In the year 2000, a female engineer at Microsoft dispatched a letter to the company headquarters, alleging she had been involved in a sexual relationship with Bill Gates. This relationship had allegedly continued for a period of several years. A spokesperson for Microsoft later acknowledged that the affair had indeed occurred. The company called it a relationship almost 20 years ago that ended amicably. But the truly crucial element here is the timeline. Microsoft's board of directors only became aware of this affair in late 2019. They immediately launched a formal investigation, retaining an outside law firm for assistance. And then, in March of 2020, before that investigation had reached its conclusion, Bill Gates abruptly stepped down from the Microsoft board. He claimed publicly that his reason was to focus more on philanthropy. However, the Wall Street Journal later reported that the board had actually been preparing to push him out. He resigned before they had the chance to officially remove him. The New York Times subsequently reported that Gates had earned what they described as a reputation for questionable conduct. This behavior manifested in the workplace and included an incident where he emailed a female employee right after a company presentation to ask her to dinner. This was clearly not a one-time error in judgment. It was indicative of a behavioral pattern that extended over years and possibly even decades. And Melinda, the woman who had poured her adult life into creating a family and a foundation with him, was about to learn the whole story. And she would discover that the foundation of their family and the foundation they had built for the world rested on a bed of secrets. With this man was forced to witness the entire scandal unfold through newspaper headlines and internal board memos she had been deliberately excluded from. But the infidelities were not the final straw for Melinda. That turning point was a man named Jeffrey Epstein. The New York Times uncovered records of no fewer than 6 encounters between Gates and Epstein from 2011 through 2014. Every single one of these meetings took place after Epstein had already entered a guilty plea in 2008 for procuring a minor for prostitution. He was a publicly registered sex offender. Bill Gates was fully aware of exactly who Jeffrey Epstein was when he made the choice to meet with him. This occurred on multiple occasions inside Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. He even took a flight on Epstein's private jet, an action Gates would later dismiss as merely an error in judgment. In 2013, both Bill and Melinda paid a visit to Epstein's townhouse together. According to various reports, Melinda felt profoundly uncomfortable during the visit and confided in friends afterward that Epstein was both abhorrent and genuinely evil. I also had an encounter with Jeffrey Epstein on exactly one occasion. You did? Yes. I did, because I felt it was important to see who this man really was. And I was filled with regret from the moment I walked through his door. He was a repugnant man. He was the very personification of evil. I experienced nightmares about it for some time after, so my heart truly breaks for these young women because I know how I felt. And I am an older, established woman. My goodness! She informed Bill directly that she wanted absolutely nothing to do with this individual ever again. Bill chose not to listen. He continued his meetings with Epstein for at least 1 more year after her request. For Melinda, that was the ultimate breaking point. It wasn't just the meetings themselves, but rather what they exposed about the true nature of her husband's character. He deliberately chose an association with a convicted sex offender over his wife's clearly articulated and deeply felt boundary. He prioritized his own professional networking and personal interests far above her trust and emotional safety. He did all of this with the full knowledge of Epstein's convictions. The Wall Street Journal revealed in May of 2021 that Melinda had already been in consultation with divorce lawyers as far back as October of 2019, which was precisely when the New York Times published its detailed investigation into Bill's relationship with Epstein. She certainly did not just wake up one morning and impulsively decide to leave him. She had been carefully planning her exit for nearly 2 full years before the public knew anything. But the sensational newspaper headlines only revealed part of the narrative. What Melinda conveyed in her own words ran much deeper. Bill maintained a friendship or a business relationship or some other form of contact with Jeffrey Epstein, and that was something you found very disturbing. Did that element play any role at all in the process of the divorce? Yes, as I have said, it is never one single thing. It was many things, but I absolutely did not like that he had been holding meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. No, and you made that known to him. I made my position very clear to him. In her 2025 book, The Next Day, Melinda wrote with careful precision but unmistakable clarity about what she referred to as betrayals within her marriage. Not a singular betrayal, but betrayals in the plural. She wrote that therapy made it possible for me to respond to the betrayals in my marriage without betraying myself in return. She also described a news article about Epstein that brought up very serious questions concerning Bill's personal conduct. These were questions that suggested he had betrayed not only our marriage vows, but also our fundamental values. That specific word, values, is the absolute key to comprehending why this divorce was so profoundly devastating. The affairs were agonizing. The meetings with Epstein were deeply humiliating. But what ultimately shattered the marriage was Melinda's realization that the man she thought she had known, the very man who stood by her side at their foundation, vowing to improve the world, possessed a private self that starkly contradicted everything they publicly claimed to represent together. When the divorce became public on May 3rd, 2021, the public's reaction was simply enormous, but the private consequences within the Gates family circle were even worse. Reports began to surface that the Gates children were absolutely furious with their father. Jennifer Gates, their eldest daughter, later characterized the time as an incredibly challenging stretch of time for our whole family. Sources with close ties to the family informed reporters that the children were struggling to reconcile the father they had always known, with the shocking headlines detailing affairs and secret meetings with a man convicted as a sex offender. For children who were raised with the core belief that their family was dedicated to creating a better world, observing their father's public reputation crumble in real time must have felt as if the very ground was collapsing beneath them. 5 months afterward, in October of 2021, Jennifer married the Olympic equestrian Niall Nassar at the sprawling family horse farm in North Salem, New York. Both Bill and Melinda were in attendance. Just imagine that scenario for a second, a daughter's wedding, which is supposed to be the most wonderful day of her entire life. And there her parents are attempting to navigate the complete wreckage of a scandal-plagued divorce while putting on smiles for photographs. Every single person in that room was aware of what had transpired, and the resulting tension was practically impossible to ignore. For 3 years following the divorce, Bill and Melinda attempted to co-chair the Gates Foundation, together with a trial period integrated into their settlement. If their collaboration proved unworkable, Melinda had the option to depart with funds for her own philanthropic endeavors. In May 2024, she reached her conclusion. Her resignation followed. The foundation's title was altered to remove her name. Bill assumed the role of sole chair, and Melinda was granted $12.5 billion. She committed these funds to supporting women's health and reproductive rights via her personal organization, Pivotal Ventures. Many of you mentioned this in the comments on our previous video, so I will clarify. Is Bill Gates' philanthropic work authentic, or is it a strategic move? The truthful response is that it's both. The Gates Foundation has produced real, tangible benefits. Countless children have been immunized against polio, and billions have been channeled into the fight against malaria. People's lives have been preserved. This is an undeniable fact. Yet an investigation by ProPublica revealed that the ultra-wealthy can secure tax advantages of as much as 74% by using philanthropic frameworks. Furthermore, critics note that the foundation effectively shapes the global health policy for bodies like the World Health Organization, all without any form of democratic oversight. It is possible to save millions of lives while also gaining financially from the effort. Those two concepts are not in conflict with one another. For decades, Bill Gates has successfully done both, and Melinda was instrumental in building every single part of it, which is why her exit had such a significant impact. When later questioned about her departure from the foundation, Melinda stated her relief at being away from all the muck. Just consider that expression for a moment. The woman who was a co-founder of the planet's largest private foundation characterized her exit as an escape from the muck. That is not the choice of words from someone who departed on amicable terms. It is the language of an individual who felt she was suffocating. And then, the year 2026 arrived. In late January, a huge collection of Epstein files was released by the Department of Justice, containing over 3 million documents and images. A CNN analysis uncovered several hundred mentions of Gates within those files, which included a multitude of emails that detailed planned meetings, dinners, and Epstein's efforts to arrange introductions for Gates. Documents revealed a degree of coordination between the two individuals that was far more extensive than anything previously disclosed. In an interview with 9 News Australia, Gates responded by admitting it was foolish of him to have associated with Epstein, and that he deeply regrets every single minute of it. He also asserted that Epstein's assertions about him in the files were untrue, but the fallout was already escalating. Within a few weeks, Gates withdrew from a keynote speech at the India AI Impact Summit, following intense public criticism over his Epstein ties, which made his presence there unsustainable. The Gates Foundation explained the cancellation was to ensure the focus remains on the AI Summit's key priorities, a clear admission that his attendance had become a major liability. Melinda also made a public statement. During an NBC News interview in February of 2026, she remarked, "Bill has to account for his name appearing in those files." She conveyed a sense of profound sadness upon learning of the revelations. Even 5 years post-divorce, the shadow of Epstein continues to loom over this family. Here is the element that I find myself continually returning to. In each interview since the separation, Bill Gates identifies losing Melinda as his most significant regret. While appearing on the Today Show on February 4th, 2025, to publicize his memoir source code, he said something that gave me pause. Despite the divorce not being a great experience, raising those 3 children and the collaborative work we managed to accomplish, even with the knowledge it wouldn't be permanent, he would choose to do it again. He is asserting he would marry Melinda once more, fully aware it would culminate in a divorce, conscious of the heartache, the public disgrace, and the sensational headlines. The rationale is that the family they created together was more valuable than all of it. This is either the most sincere statement Bill Gates has ever uttered, or it is his most shrewdly calculated one, because he is fundamentally conceding that the marriage held more worth than any other aspect of his existence, more valuable than Microsoft, more so than the foundation, and even more valuable than $100 billion, and he is the person responsible for its demolition. When Melinda was queried about Bill labeling the divorce a mistake, she remarked to Elle magazine, "You've evidently done more Googling than I have." She then stated, "Divorces are agonizing, and it is not a situation I would hope for any family to endure." She also characterized leaving her marriage as one of the most challenging yet crucial decisions she had ever made in her lifetime. She never labeled it a mistake. She specifically called it important. Bill has since moved forward. He acknowledged on the Today Show his relationship with Paula Hurd, the widow of the late Oracle CEO Mark Hurd. "I'm very fortunate to have a serious girlfriend named Paula," he shared. "We are enjoying our time." His children have gradually mended their own relationships with him. Bill and Melinda maintain what she terms a friendly rapport, but they are no longer friends. Their interactions occur at family functions for their children, and more recently their grandchildren. However, the alliance has ended and any semblance of warmth has vanished with it. He pledged a 3-part memoir with the initial volume detailing his upbringing and formative years. The final installment, he claims, is set to tackle his charitable work, their union, and notably the Jeffrey Epstein connection. Whether that particular book ever materializes remains to be seen, and should it be published, we will learn if he presents the unvarnished truth or a carefully crafted narrative vetted by his legal team. Of this we can be certain when Bill Gates calls the divorce the single greatest regret of his life. You should take him at his word. This is not a statement of nobility. It is because this is the one misstep that all his wealth cannot undo, his legion of engineers is unable to debug, and his massive foundation is powerless to erase. He lost Melinda. He came dangerously close to alienating his children, a fact that no measure of remorse can alter. Melinda, however, is not portraying herself as a victim, not in the slightest. She remained in the marriage for years after she had first sought counsel from divorce lawyers. She also profited from the very same complex financial arrangements that protect the vast Gates fortune from taxation. And when she ultimately decided to leave, she secured $12.5 billion and proceeded to build her own powerful enterprise centered on the initiatives she holds dearest. That is hardly the action of a powerless onlooker. That is the calculated decision of a woman who was perpetually observant, consistently strategic, and who selected her timing with immense precision. But that fact does not alter the fundamental reality. Bill Gates possessed something that $100 billion could never repurchase: a family's unwavering and absolute trust, and he squandered that for indiscretions that demanded an investigation from his own board for associating with a man who should have been incarcerated, and for a deep-seated arrogance that led him to believe he was exempt from the rules that govern the rest of the world. In our prior video, over 100 viewers cited this. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet lose his own soul? Bill Gates constructed a $100 billion fortune. He revolutionized how every person on the planet interacts with a computer. He established a foundation that has saved millions of lives, yet he lost the woman who witnessed it all, the partner who accompanied him through each and every phase of that monumental success. He is acutely aware of it. He has now admitted it publicly, and Melinda's reaction is profoundly revealing. She refrained from labeling it a mistake. Instead, she deemed it important. We explored Melinda's perspective on this story in significant detail in our previous installment. If you happen to miss it, that video is on your screen this moment. Click it, because what she disclosed about Bill directly from her own mouth delves into matters even more profound than what we have discussed today. A single bell tolls.